If you've ever been completely alone at night, no roommates, no neighbors close enough to matter, no one to call, then you already know that feeling. That quiet that isn't really quiet. That stillness that starts to feel wrong the longer it lasts. I know that feeling better than anyone now. This happened 3 years ago, when I was living by myself in a rental house outside Knoxville, Tennessee. It was one of those old properties on a county road, surrounded by about 2 acres of trees on every side. I liked the isolation when I moved in. I was going through a rough stretch, job change, bad breakup, and I wanted space. I wanted to be left alone. I got exactly what I wanted. It was a Thursday night in late October. I remember that because I had to be at work early the next morning, and I was annoyed about not being able to sleep in. I'd eaten dinner, watched some TV, done the dishes, normal stuff. It was around 11 when I shut the lights off and got into bed. I fell asleep fast. That part matters because what woke me up wasn't a sound I dreamed. It was real. A knock, 3 of them, on my front door. I lay still for a second, convincing myself I'd imagined it. Then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I checked my phone. 2:14 in the morning. I didn't move right away. I just listened. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. I got up slow, pulled on a shirt, and stood at the bedroom door for probably a full minute just listening. Nothing. I told myself it was a driver who'd ended up on the wrong road. Maybe someone whose car broke down. I walked to the front of the house and looked through the peephole. The porch light was on. I kept it on a timer and I could see the porch clearly. Nobody there. I exhaled, checked the window to the left of the door, looked out into the dark yard. Nothing moved. The gravel driveway was empty. I stood there probably 2 minutes waiting for something and got nothing. I went back to bed. But I didn't sleep. I was lying there staring at the ceiling when I heard the back door handle move. Not a knock. Not someone testing it casually. It moved like someone gripped it, turned it slow, and then stopped when they realized it was locked. One motion. Deliberate. I did not breathe. I had a handgun in the nightstand. I'd owned it for years and never once thought I'd actually use it. I had it in my hand before I even made a conscious decision to grab it. I sat up on the edge of the bed and put my feet on the floor and just listened so hard I could hear my own pulse. The back door handle moved again. Same slow, careful motion. I stood up. I crossed the bedroom to the hallway, keeping against the wall. The back door was at the end of the kitchen, and I could see it from where I was standing. The deadbolt was thrown. The chain was on. And then I heard something that I still can't explain without my stomach dropping. A key going into the lock. The metallic scratch of it, testing. The way it sounds when someone tries a key and it doesn't quite fit, so they pull it out and try again. That sound happened 3 times. Whoever was outside had a key, or thought they did. I moved into the kitchen and put my back against the wall beside the refrigerator where I had a full sight line to the door. My hands were shaking. I had the safety off and I kept telling myself to stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. The key stopped. Silence. Then footsteps on the back porch, not trying to be quiet anymore, and then off the steps into the gravel, and I heard a car. No headlights came through the windows. Just the sound of an engine turning over somewhere on the far edge of my property, and then tires on gravel going slow, and then nothing. I called 911. 2 deputies came out. They walked the property, checked the doors, checked the windows. One of them found something on the back porch that I hadn't seen, a piece of electrical tape pressed over my back door light. The bulb was fine. Someone had taped over it before I'd gone to bed that night so the back of my house would be dark. They'd been planning it before I'd even eaten dinner. The deputies took a report. They told me to keep my doors locked and call if anything else happened. I could tell by their tone that they didn't expect to find whoever it was. It was a county road. No cameras. No good reason for anyone to be there. I asked the landlord the next morning if anyone else had keys to the property. He said just himself and me. He said the locks had been changed before I moved in, but when I pressed him on it, really pressed him, he admitted he didn't actually know if they had been. He thought they had. He wasn't sure. I moved out within 2 weeks. I never got an answer, no arrest, no follow-up from the sheriff's office. I drove past that house about a year later and someone else was living there, lights on, car in the driveway, and I remember thinking I hope they changed the locks. I hope they actually changed the locks. Because here's what I kept coming back to. Whoever was outside my back door at 2 in the morning had taped over that light before dark. That means they'd been on my property while I was home, while I was eating dinner, while I was watching TV like nothing was wrong. They were already there before the night started. Whatever they were there for, I don't want to know. I was asleep with an unlocked back door in a house on a dark county road, with no neighbors close enough to hear anything. I was 23 years old the first time I understood that being alone doesn't mean you're safe. It was a Tuesday in late November. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood that's not bad enough to worry about, but not good enough to feel comfortable either. My roommate had moved out 2 months before, and I hadn't found anyone to replace him yet. So it was just me, 4 walls, and whatever noise the building decided to make at night. I worked a closing shift at a grocery store back then. Most nights I'd get home around 11, eat something quick and crash. Nothing complicated, nothing exciting. That was fine with me. That Tuesday I clocked out a little after 10:30. The drive home was quiet, empty roads, orange streetlights. I parked in the lot behind my building, grabbed my bag, and headed up to the 3rd floor. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and dropped my keys on the counter. That's when I noticed it. The light in the hallway was on. I never leave that light on. I'm one of those people who turns off every light before I leave. Not because I'm careful, just habit. I stood there in the doorway for a second, bag still on my shoulder, telling myself I must have forgotten. It happens. I went in, closed the door, and locked it. I changed out of my work clothes, made a sandwich, and sat down on the couch. The apartment was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind. The kind that feels like something is pressing against your ears. I turned the TV on just to fill the room with sound and ate without really tasting anything. Around midnight, I started getting ready for bed. I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, and when I came back into the hallway, I stopped. My bedroom door was open. I always sleep with it closed. Always. Not halfway. Not cracked. Closed. It's another one of those habits I've had since I was a kid. I stared at it for a moment and felt something cold move through my chest. I told myself I must have bumped it on the way out. I walked over, looked in, scanned the room. Bed, dresser, closet door shut. Nothing out of place. I went to bed. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. There was no sound, no nightmare, nothing obvious. I just opened my eyes, stared at the ceiling, and felt completely wrong. Like my body had sent up a flare before my brain caught up. I lay still and listened. The TV was off. I must have fallen asleep before it shut down on the timer. The apartment was dead silent. Then I heard it. Water, running water, coming from the bathroom. My first thought was that the faucet had a leak. It had dripped before, and I'd told the landlord about it twice without him doing anything. So I lay there for another 30 seconds telling myself that's all it was. A drip. A loose handle. But it wasn't a drip. It was steady. Full pressure. I sat up slowly. The bedroom was dark except for the faint glow of the parking lot lights through the curtain. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the hallway. The bathroom was just 6 feet away. The door was slightly open and I could hear it clearly now. Definitely running. Full stream. I stood up, walked to the bathroom door, pushed it open. The faucet was on. Hot side steam was just starting to collect near the ceiling. I turned it off. Stood there with my heart going faster than it should have been. I told myself I'd left it on. I told myself that even though I didn't believe it. I went back to bed, lay there with my eyes open. Listened to the silence close back in. I didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, I convinced myself there was a logical explanation for all of it. The light, the door, the faucet, individually, each one had a reason. Together, they made a shape I didn't want to look at directly. I went to work. Came home that evening just before 6. Daylight still coming through the windows, which helped. I cooked, ate, watched TV, kept everything normal. But that night before I went to bed, I did something I'd never done before. I opened my closet, checked behind my shower curtain, looked under my bed. Felt ridiculous doing it. Felt necessary anyway. Everything was clear. I went to sleep around 11. Slept fine until about 3 in the morning when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I grabbed it, groggy, and looked at the screen. A motion alert from the security camera app. I'd set up a small camera in my living room a few weeks before, mostly because my laptop had gone missing and I'd never figured out how. I'd forgotten it was even there. The alert had a short clip attached. I sat up and pressed play. The timestamp read 2:51 a.m. The living room was dark, lit only by the standby light on the TV. The camera angle covered the couch, the coffee table, and the front door. A man was standing at my front door. Inside. He was inside my apartment, standing with his back to the camera, facing the door, completely still. He stood there for 11 seconds. Then he reached for the deadbolt, unlocked it, opened the door, and walked out. Closed it behind him. I watched the clip 3 times. I couldn't breathe right. He hadn't broken in. He had unlocked the deadbolt from the inside, which meant he'd already been in there, which meant at some point he had come in and had been there while I was home. While I was sleeping, I called the police. They came, took a report, dusted a few surfaces. The officer I spoke to had a tired, seen-it-all face, but even he paused when I showed him the clip. They never identified the man. The footage wasn't clear enough for a full match. Building management pulled records and found that a master key had been reported missing 3 weeks before, a maintenance copy that had disappeared without explanation. They changed my locks that same day. I moved out 2 weeks later. I still don't know how many times he'd been inside. I don't know what he was looking for or what he was waiting for. What I know is this: that night changed something in me permanently. I check every room before I sleep, every single night without exception. And sometimes, when it's late and the apartment is too quiet, I open that camera app and watch the living room feed in real time, just to make sure the door stays closed. It was February, and I was living in a rented house on the edge of Dayton, Ohio. My roommate had gone back to his parents' place for 2 weeks over some family thing, and I had the whole house to myself. At first, I was excited about it. No dishes in the sink that weren't mine, nobody hogging the TV, just me, the couch, and whatever I wanted for dinner. That lasted about 3 days. By the 4th night, something had shifted. I don't know how to explain it except to say that silence sits on you differently when you're the only person in a building. Every sound the house made, the heat clicking on, the refrigerator hum, a car passing outside, I noticed all of it. Not because I was scared, just because there was nothing else to filter it out. I'd been working late that week, picking up extra shifts at the distribution warehouse on Needmore Road. I'd get home around 11:30, eat something fast, shower, and crash. Simple routine, nothing interesting, nothing to be worried about. The night it started, I'd gotten home later than usual, almost 1 in the morning. I remember unlocking the front door and noticing I'd left the kitchen light on before I left. I didn't think anything of it. I do that all the time. I went inside, dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my boots. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and that's when I saw it. The back door was unlocked. Now I want to be clear about something. That door had a deadbolt and a chain lock. I used both every single night because the neighborhood wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. I was careful. I'd been careful since I moved in. So standing there staring at that door, deadbolt turned, chain hanging loose, my brain just kind of stalled. I stood there for a full minute trying to convince myself I'd forgotten, that I'd been in a rush that morning and just walked out without locking it. I almost talked myself into it. Almost. Then I noticed the chair. We had this old wooden chair that sat in the corner of the kitchen. Nobody ever used it. It was just there because the previous tenant left it and neither of us bothered to move it. That night it was pulled away from the corner and sitting in the middle of the room, facing the back door. I hadn't moved that chair. I knew I hadn't moved it. My phone was in my hand before I even made a conscious decision to pick it up. I dialed my roommate, got his voicemail, hung up. I stood in the kitchen doorway, not going in, not leaving, just frozen in that stupid in-between space where your body can't decide what to do because your brain is still processing. I made myself go through the house, every room, closets, bathroom, the small bedroom we used for storage. Nothing. Nobody. Everything else looked exactly the way I'd left it. Just those two things, the door, the chair, sitting wrong in an otherwise normal house. I deadbolted the back door, put the chain on, and pushed the chair back into the corner. Then I sat on the couch with every light in the house on and tried to figure out what to do. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I called my landlord and told him what I'd found. He said he'd look into it, check if anyone had been given a spare key, let me know. He said it in that tone people use when they're agreeing with you just to get off the phone. 3 days passed. Nothing. Then I came home one evening, it was around 7, still light out, and there was a padlock on the storage unit in the backyard. Our storage unit. The one where we kept bikes, an old space heater, a tote of winter gear. I had not put a padlock on it. There had never been a padlock on it. I called my roommate again. He answered this time. He hadn't put it there either. I stood in the backyard holding my phone and staring at a lock on a door that I did not put there, on a unit that held my stuff, in the backyard of a house I paid rent on. And I understood, maybe for the first time, what it actually means to feel unsafe somewhere you're supposed to feel safe. I called the police that night. They came out, walked the property, cut the padlock off the storage unit. Everything inside looked untouched. They said there were no signs of forced entry anywhere. One of the officers told me it was possible someone had a duplicate key from a previous rental. He said it like that was somehow reassuring. They suggested I change the locks and call back if anything else happened. I changed the locks the next morning, paid for it out of my own pocket. New deadbolts on both doors, new chain on the back. I didn't tell my landlord. I didn't want to wait on him anymore. For the next week nothing happened. The house was quiet. Normal. I started to relax slowly, the way you do when the thing that scared you seems far enough behind you. Then I checked the storage unit one afternoon and found something inside that didn't belong to me. A sleeping bag, rolled up, shoved behind the space heater. Not ours. I'd never seen it before in my life. I stepped back out of that unit so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. Someone had been using it, not to store things. Someone had been in there, sleeping in there, in my backyard. While I was inside the house, 10 feet away, thinking I was alone, the police came back. This time they took it more seriously. They dusted for prints, talked to a few neighbors, took the sleeping bag as evidence. One of the neighbors, an older woman 2 houses down, mentioned she'd seen someone in the alley behind our houses a few nights the previous week. She'd assumed it was a tenant. They never found out who it was. No arrest, no name, no explanation. Case went quiet the same way those things always do when there's nothing solid to go on. My roommate came home 2 days later. I told him everything. He wanted to move. We didn't, but only because our lease had 4 months left on it and we couldn't afford to break it. I never felt comfortable in that house again. Not once. Every time I came home and it was quiet, I thought about how quiet it had been all those other nights when I thought I was alone. These are Alone at Night horror stories. If you want more stories like this, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment below and tell me, could you have stayed calm in these situations? And if these kept you up, hit the like button. I'll see you in the next one.